So, what's this lesson about? This lesson now is very much a knowledge-based lesson, and it's going to get you to know the names of the different bones of the body. So there's various different bones that we have to know on the GCSE PE course. This lesson talks you through that, give you the names, help you to remember the names, help you to understand the functions of those different bones, and also builds on the last lesson that we did. I think Miss Anderson did it, and that was classifying the different bones into the short bones, irregular bones, flat bones, long bones. Helps to build on that. But ultimately, we're going to know the names of the different bones in the body. We're going to understand the functions and importance of the spinal column. So this is your vertebrae, and be able to label the spinal column or the vertebral column. So that's what we're going to do today. But for now, there's a little memory platform on the screen, and I just want you to take some time to pause this and try and answer those 10 questions. And then when you move on to the next slide, you'll see the answers that are on there as well. So see how you get on with that. So here's the answers for this. I'm going to flash through these pretty quickly. Might give you a little bit of explanation, but flash through. So first question, identify the primary component used by a marathon runner. Of course it is cardiovascular fitness, cardiovascular endurance, to accept either of those. Question 2, bones make moving joints possible. Okay, well this is just an aid to help us to remember the different functions of the skeletal system, which are of course blood cell production, muscle attachment, mineral storage, joints for movement, and protection of vital organs. Very important that we are protecting those organs that keep us alive. Question 3. What is the role of the aorta? Well, this is to take oxygenated blood to the muscles from the heart. It's a big artery that leaves the heart and takes the blood to the muscles for exercise to deliver all that nice oxygen so we can hopefully exercise aerobically, deliver that oxygen to those muscles and the rest of the cells in the body. 4. What type of bone is a rib? Well, a rib, of course, is a flat bone. Okay, protects our internal organs such as our lungs and our heart. Question 5. Define a sedentary lifestyle. Well, hopefully our lifestyles aren't too sedentary at the moment, which would mean that we have little activity. So hopefully you're able to build in some activity. It's a great time to just get off the couch, get away from the Xbox, Netflix, whatever you're doing, and get active, get out of breath and get active. Go out for a little run, follow the Lambeth Academy Instagram page, see the challenges that we're putting on there, the workouts that we're putting on there, because if we're sat around doing nothing, we know what happens with that energy balance. If we end up not burning off the calories, we're going to start getting fat on our body, and we don't want that. We want to stay as active as we can in these times. 6. How does my body recover from an oxygen debt? Well, just thinking about what somebody who's in oxygen debt, if I was looking at them, what would I see? And I'd see them deep gasps of breath, trying to get more oxygen in, to obviously repay that oxygen debt, get rid of that lactic acid. Question 7. Identify an athlete best suited to interval training. Loads of athletes you can use. Best one, you just know it's a nailed on answer if you write a sprinter, because for them it's all about speed. Interval training improves speed. Name an area that you find short bones in. Well, you could say the wrist, or you could say the foot. So around the ankles, those short bones that we find in the wrist, the carpals, and the foot, the tarsals, the top of the foot. Equation for aerobic respiration. Oxygen and glucose gives us energy, water, and carbon dioxide. They're the byproducts. And then question 10, what about anaerobic respiration? Now we know anaerobic means no oxygen, so we just have glucose being turned into energy, and obviously there's a byproduct there of lactic acid. So that's the byproduct that builds up in our muscles and starts our muscles to feel sore and ache, and ultimately to fatigue, and then stop exercising when we really need to be exercising. So that was the memory platform. Give yourself a score out of 10. Hope you did well. If not, hope you learned. Right, now I think this came up in the last lesson at the end, but let's just have a look at it now. Good little chance just to recap and engage your brain back into where we are with the skeletal system. Write 4 sentences to explain how the different types of bones help us in sport. Now you can pause the PowerPoint and give this a go. So I will just leave you to do that yourself. If you have trouble here, obviously come out of this one, go back into the last PowerPoint and have a little look over that. Just a recap and to let you know what it is that we're going to be focusing on in this lesson here. To know the names of the different bones in the body. As I said, very much knowledge learning lesson. You're going to have to listen to me talking about what the different bones are. Lots of you from Key Stage 3 from year 9 will have been knowing the different names of the different bones. This crosses over with your science lessons. So hopefully there's a good basis of primary knowledge that you already have, so you don't need to worry too much about um, the rest. So, learning the names of the bones. There's a key on this page as well, and we know we can classify bones into different types. We got long bones, short bones, irregular bones, and flat bones. So this is what we're going to do. Now the first one we're going to look at here is called the sternum. Sometimes people call this the breastplate. Now this plays a really, really vital role in that it protects the chest cavity, because we know we've got lots of vital organs inside there. So we've got our heart just behind it, we've got our lungs in there, and it helps the ribs to connect. So that is called the sternum. Very, very important role when you think about impact activities, possibly such as rugby, definitely boxing. Um, it plays a vital role there. Next one we got is the humerus. Now just notice the spelling on this. Humerus, pay attention to that. This is the bone that runs down from your shoulder joint down to your elbow. Now we're into talking about those long bones. So this is a long bone, and it really helps us in sport because we use it as a lever to throw things, to throw punches, to move our arms into different positions. You know, there's so many different examples that you can use for the humerus. But it's called the humerus, and that's what we need to know. This very, very large flat bone is called the pelvis. Now, if you can notice, this is helps with the articulation of the hip joint. Articulation just means to move, and you'll see the upper leg is connected to the pelvis. Right, moving on to the lower arm. Now, one thing that's really important to notice here, at any time, usually in GCSE PE or in medicine, anyone that goes on to study physiotherapy and medicine, when you show the position of the body, you have to show it as your palms are facing forward. So that means that your thumb is out to the side like that. And that's very, very important because things change, particularly the lower arm. If you don't remember that, your palms are facing out when you're looking at a picture like this. But those bones that are the wrist bones at the bottom of the two lower arm bones are called the carpals, short bones. Right, then we move on to the femur. Now this is um, the longest bone in the body. It is our upper leg, so we know we've got our quadricep, that's the muscle that will be in this location. But our femur again acts as a lever. There's so many different examples of using a femur: running, um, kicking in martial arts, jumping. We really need to use the power of these levers as they connect to the muscular system. Patella. Many of you will know this one as the kneecap. So we're now going to refer to it as patella. Again, notice the spelling of this. Don't get it wrong. There's a double L in it. Now the patella is a flat bone and it sits just between your femur and then the bones of the lower legs, which we'll come on to in a minute. And it actually sits underneath or within a tendon. And that tendon is the end of the quadricep that goes over the patella and then joins to the lower bone, which we'll talk about in a minute. So patella. It's a floating bone, it's a flat bone. Down at the bottom, so if you remember, if we look back at the wrist, we call those carpals, but down in the ankle area, we call these bones the tarsals. Good way to remember this, tarsals begins with a T, close to the toes, tarsal toes, because you can very, very easily mix up carpals and tarsals. So tarsals are down near the toes, they're your tarsal bones. Underneath them, you've got your metatarsals. Again, a little bit confusing, but meta is just the smaller bones which are connected off the tarsals. Metatarsals. Let me go back there a second. Oh, can't do that. Also, just looking down at the foot, we've got the phalanges. Now, this is quite a tricky word to remember, but people tend to like saying this word for some reason. Phalanges. Now, they're the very, very small long bones, if that makes sense. At the ends of the toes, these are called the phalanges, which we're also going to have in our hands. So, phalanges are both the end of those, the end bones of our feet and in our hands as well. If you pop over to the other side, you'll see the cranium there at the top. Some of you will call it a skull. We're now going to call it a cranium. Now, this plays a vital role in the body, and particularly when we're doing sports. Cranium, obviously, primary function is for protection of soft tissue, the brain that's underneath it. We don't want any damage to the brain. We don't want brain damage. And in sport, the cranium plays a vital role in that. Think about Mr. Rowe when he's playing football, centre half, lots of times having to, perform defensive clearances with his head when he's heading the ball out. And his cranium is protecting the impact of that ball as much as it can on the head. Other great sports, boxing, rugby, American football. There's a reason American football they put helmets on just to increase the protection of the cranium of the brain. The cranium also does play a role in movement because you've got muscles towards the upper end of the vertebrae that are connecting to the cranium to allow our head to move up and down, side to side. So there's also movement, but primary, just want you to think about the protection of the brain. Now we move on to this fixed bone here. You can see it rising up, and in fact, as you're watching this, it's good practice, I suppose, to just grab those bones and just see what they feel like. Now, many of you may have had injuries to the clavicle, fallen off your bike and broke your collarbone, very, very sore. But this is that one there that's connected into the deltoid joint, just helps to kind of fix that joint in place, up around the shoulder joint, and the upper arm, and it just keeps everything nice and secure there. So that's your clavicle. You got this, obviously we're looking at the back of a body here, and we've got this long flat bone. Some of you will have called it your shoulder blade in the past, but actually the term we're going to move forward with is scapula. This is a very flat bone, lots of muscles attached to this bone. There's lots of movement here, and because of that you can get lots of injuries with this bone here. I know Mr. Shaw has had horrendous times with his shoulder joint and it coming out of position, causing all sorts of pain, ligament damage, etc. But we're focusing on the scapula there, what we would sometimes call the shoulder blade. Then we have the ribs. Now, the ribs extend out from the vertebrae, from the vertebral column, connected, if you look on the left hand side, connected to the sternum. So those ribs also vital role in protection of the internal organs, such as the heart, the lungs, and those other vital organs that are inside our body. Just think about lots of sports, lots of activities where we're getting a serious amount of impact on our ribs, tackles by very, very strong and powerful rugby player, smashed into the ribs, and the ribs better do their job of protecting those vital organs. So there you go, that's the ribs, important role. Then we got our vertebrae. We're going to go into a little bit more detail a little bit later in the lesson, but we've got our vertebrae, irregular bones that run the whole way up from the pelvis all the way up to the cranium and give us a lot of support in how we stand and play a key role in posture. Vital that we protect this bone and we don't put too much strain or stress on our vertebrae, all these bones that are interconnected here. Okay, again going back, remember what I said about how important it is that you understand that that smaller bone sticking out is the thumb. So that's how we look at this one now. As you turn your hand out like that, just do it now. With your thumb out, hands down. That one that's on the outside, so on the thumb side, is called your radius. That is your radius. Um, this connects to the elbow and obviously to the wrist as well to perform so many of those sporting actions that we need. And in fact, this joint can also cause a little bit of rotation because you can turn your hand over if you just do it yourself while you're listening to me. Turn your hand over, you can see that it rotates back and forth. Without that rotation, sports would be quite tricky and difficult, particularly sports like boxing, golf, cricket, and table tennis, those sports where we need to rotate that wrist and that elbow joint around. So that's your radius. Key part here, remember that your palm is still facing out as you look at it, and your radius is the one that's on the thumb side. Next one is, sorry for the pause there, next one is the ulna, and that is the one that is underneath the radius, and that's how I remembered it when I was at school. As soon as I knew that I was hold my hand out with my thumb out, I knew that the one underneath was my ulna. Again, notice the spelling of all these. The ulna is underneath. Then we're on to the metacarpals. We've already looked at the metatarsals. Tarsals down in the foot, near the toe, begins with a T. These are the metacarpals. So those longer bones that then extend out from where the carpals are in the wrist and the hand. So those metacarpal bones are the bones, you can just feel them there in your hand, that run down to the knuckles, those long bones. And you got your phalanges again. Great word, phalanges. Those bones at the end of your hands. Same name with your feet. So phalanges in the hands, phalanges in the feet. So moving down now to the bones of the lower leg, we've got our fibula. These are tricky, these two terms, because people mix them up all the time. Fibula. Now you can see that that's a very narrow long bone in the lower leg on the outside. So as you look down at your lower leg, there's a bone that runs around your gastrocnemius, which is the calf of your gastrocnemius muscle. The fibula is on the outside. And our tibia is the larger one that connects up to the femur of the upper leg. So the tibia. How do I remember tibia? Well, I always thought of the phrase two tibias touch. Nice bit of alliteration there for those English students. Two tibias touch. And what I'm talking about there is the tibia goes up and it's the one actually that touches onto the femur around the patella area and has the patella just floating in front of that, the kneecap. Right, I'm just going to flash up here. Where are the long bones of the body? Well, there they are. Phalanges, metatarsals, humerus, femur. Radius, obviously, and the ulna, long bones again. Metacarpals, the phalanges, fibula, tibia. Those blue ones there are the long bones. So now we're moving on to the short bones. Short bones are carpals. Carpals are in your wrist. We've also got the tarsals, short bones. Remember, those short bones are really, really good for weight-bearing activities. That's why they are that shape. They're short and they provide a lot of support for activities such as running. If you look at the carpals, punching, the amount of support that you get from punching, from remaining in a handstand is a good example, I think, as well. So those ones there. Now the flat bones, if you can remember back to the last lesson Miss Anderson did, flat bones are a lot of what they do is about muscle attachment. So that's why they're the shape they are. So we've got the patella. Vertebrae are irregular. Lots of irregular bones are stuck together. Sternum is a flat bone again. Lots of muscle attachment going on there, particularly helping the ribs to attach to it. Pelvis, again, another flat bone. Cranium obviously is a flat bone. Clavicle, very similar to the ribs, is flat. We've got scapula, probably the flattest bone. It's like a little plate. And we've got our ribs there as well. So that is a lot of listening to me. But what you could do now is just obviously pause this, try and go through section by section. Choose the arm, choose the upper body, then move into the lower body. And just see if you can just look at it and try and remember and revise. If I was in a lesson now, I'll be giving you a lot of time just to focus on this, try and learn it, and then obviously close books and a lot of questioning from me, possibly whiteboards. But we don't have that option now, so I'm just hoping that you will just pause this now and just spend a bit of time trying to learn those bones. Maybe circle the ones that you're finding the trickiest. People are going to know what the cranium is, and most people will know maybe what the femur is. Patella is quite easy to remember, but just go through and learn those ones, circle those ones that you're finding a little bit tricky, and do those ones. So here's a little tester for you, little memory recall. See if you were able to learn and memorize those muscles. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to point an arrow to each, I said muscles, I meant bones, obviously. I'm going to point an arrow to each area, each bone, and see if you can write it down, or at least name it. So let's have a go here. What is this bone here? Write it down. See if you get the spelling right. It is, of course, your sternum. So I don't mind whether you write it down or you just say it out loud. See if you can remember it. But that one is your sternum. Next one. This long bone here, what is that? It is, of course, your humerus. This large bone here, top of the leg, is called your pelvis. Short bones in your wrist, what are they called? They are, of course, your carpals. This long bone here is your femur. This one here, a couple of seconds, write it down. See if you get the spelling right on this one. Patella. Next one is this one here. Write it down. Or these bones, I should say. Not to be confused with the carpals in the hand. These are your tarsals, near your toes. Tarsals. Underneath your tarsals you have these bones. Write it down. Say it out loud. Metatarsals. Yourself a mark if you got that right. Next one. And underneath them, What is that called? I said we love to say it. What is that called? Feels good to say it. Phalanges. Easy one. What's that? We're on the diagram on the right hand side now. It is, of course, your cranium. So, next one. See if you can identify that bone there. It is called your clavicle. Well done if you got that right. It's not an easy one to remember. Your clavicle. Now this one here, what is that called? It is, of course, your scapula. Can you identify these bones here? Looks like a cage. Bit of a clue there. Is, of course, your rib cage. Well done if you got that. Give yourself a tick. Next one. What is that runs from your pelvis up to your cranium? It is, of course, we'll accept vertebrae or vertebral column. Number of different bones, all on top of each other, which we'll look at in more detail later. Vertebrae or vertebral column. Next one. Ooh, this is tricky and this will confuse a few people. Just remember the things that I said on the previous slide. It is, of course, your radius. And what is the one underneath the radius? Can you remember? Is, of course, your ulna. U-L-N-A. This bone here, or these bones, long bones here, can you identify what that is? It is, of course, your metacarpals. And again, at the end of your metacarpals, we have these bones here. What are they called? Same name as the ones on the other side at the very bottom. They are, of course, the phalanges. And we have two bones of the lower leg coming up. People always get these confused. What is that skinny one on the outside there of the lower leg? Surprised if you got this right and impressed. It is your fibula. And the larger one next to it, what is that called? That is called your tibia. Two tibias touch, alliteration. The tibia is the larger bone and it goes up and it touches the femur. It connects at the knee joint next to the femur. Two tibias touch. Right, little bit of a task for you guys to do now. You will have to pause this, take some time, and see if you can now, in your notes page or whatever you're using, can you put these bones into the correct category and state their function? So what is the function of short bones? This is trying to bring you back to learning that you did previously. Long bones, I've already given you the long bones. What's the function of long bones? Well, it's really movement. It's using them as levers, supporting actions created by the long bones through levers. And an example in the body is the humerus. There's many other examples that you could choose, such as the femur, such as the metacarpals, such as the metatarsals, such as the phalanges, or even classes of long bone. Just go down through that. Try to think. If you're getting really stuck, you may want to pause it and go back to past PowerPoints. Maybe you've saved them, maybe you download and save them, don't just leave them on Show My Homework. That would be good if you could do that. So go back and identify the function of those types of bones, but also the examples in the body, and bonus points if you can fit them all in, all the short bones that we learned about. Okay, so again, pause that, maybe take 10 minutes and see if you can complete that task before moving on to the next slide. So you may need to hit escape, give yourself a little go, see how you get on, and then come back in and join me on the next slide. Okay, so some of you will have cheated and not bothered to do that little activity. So let's have a little look now. A little look back to what is the function of those bones. Well, let's just have a look over on the right hand side, the red writing. So we know that short bones, the function is to support the weight of the body. So those tarsals in near the feet, the top of the feet, short bones, they help us lots of impact when we're running. I know I've been trying to get out for some runs, and I've been having a little bit of problems with my ankles. I've got a weak ankle anyway, but those short bones are helping me with all that impact and support that I need when I'm running. I've also got the carpals in the wrist. I do a lot of boxing. When I'm hitting the heavy bag, those carpals are able to give me the support to land those punches on the heavy bag without me hurting myself. Also, my daughter at the moment is wanting desperately to be able to do handstands. So when she's in the garden trying to do a handstand position and she's able to support herself in the handstand, it's her carpals in her hands that is helping her to support the weight of the body. So very important function. We got flap bones. What are they for? Well, protection of vital organs, um, such as the ribs. Ribs are flap bones now. Remember, sternum is a flat bone. That rib cage has such an important role to play when we're doing sport. Um, Also, they provide a surface area for muscle attachment. So those flat bones, lots of muscles can attach onto those flat bones, so enable us to have an anchor so we can um, contract our muscles and pull our bones for those sporting movements that we need to do. So flat bones, pelvis falls into that category. Obviously, I've talked about the ribs already. The cranium is another one. So good examples of flat bones right there. Then we have irregular bones. So these functions include protection and muscle attachment. So protection, if we think about the vertebrae, which we'll get onto in a second, they are protecting our spinal cord, which is running up through the center of our vertebrae. So it's really, really important role in protection there of that vital piece of equipment that we've got, our spinal cord. We do not want anything to happen to that because it can result in paralysis, which nobody wants. Okay, so here we're getting onto the vertebral column, the vertebrae. Spine, you may have called the spine in the past. We're going to call our vertebral column now. And there's different sections that you can see on the right hand side. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sections of our vertebral column. So how many bones altogether is it made up of? It's made up of 33 irregularly shaped bones. This is why we call them irregular bones. They are the vertebrae. Between each of those vertebrae, there is a pad of cartilage. So that allows movement to happen. Cartilage is that substance at the end of bones. Also prevents the bones grinding together, which can cause severe pain. And anybody that has had back pain will know that it can be very, very hard to get rid of and can just be very, very painful. So the vertebrae also protects the spinal cord. This is a really important nerve that runs up through the spine, that thing over on the right, all the way down. And it's a nerve, so it delivers like electric impulses to our muscular system to signal how we want the body to move. It can be quite tricky to remember this, but one way that I remember and I've taught my other GCSE PE classes is this phrase here: chocolate tastes like sticky cake. Okay, it's a little bit confusing, doesn't really mean too much, but the kids that I've taught in the past have always remembered this phrase: chocolate tastes like sticky cake. And it enables them to help us to know that the top 7 vertebrae are known as the cervical vertebrae. So very, very important in the movement of the upper body, of our head, thinking about when we're heading a football, when we're moving our head in boxing to evade any shots. Then we've got down to the thoracic. So this is the section of the vertebrae really where our rib cage is. And that is known as our thoracic vertebrae, and there's 12 vertebrae there. As we move down in our body to our lower back, our lumbar, lots of people, I know Miss Howe has a very painful back issues down with her lumbar area of her vertebrae. So does my wife actually. So very, very damaging. So our lumbar area is there. 5 vertebrae in the lumbar. Now at the bottom we've got our sacrum, which is a fused, it's a fixed joint, so it's not like the other vertebrae that slide and move around together. The sacrum is fixed bone that gives us stability, the same as the coccyx, which are underneath it. So sometimes people refer to this as our tailbone. So just notice the spelling on that. Coccyx, C-O-C-C-Y-X. Coccyx. Get a lot of points in Scrabble if you put that one in. And how do we remember it? Chocolate tastes like sticky cake. Right, so now we're on to a little whiteboard task if I was in the class. But which of these is not classified as a long bone? A. Clavicle, B. Radius, C. Ulna, and D. Tibia. Make your decision. Answer is coming up. Is of course the clavicle, which is our collarbone. You can feel it there. Just dig your hand into it. Runs kind of away from your neck out towards your deltoid muscle. That is your clavicle. Many people have broken that. It's not a long bone. It's a flat bone. Next question. Which is the correct order of the vertebral column? So thinking about the correct order. So I'll give you a clue here. Go top to bottom. Think of that phrase that I tried to get you to remember so you could know which order they come in. A, B, C, or D. Answer is about to come up. It is of course B. Chocolate tastes like sticky cake. Next one. Name the anatomical name for the following bones. Okay, so I'll give you about 20 seconds to write those down from A to E. See what you can remember. Have a little sip of my coffee while you're doing that. Five seconds left. Okay, moving on. These are the answers. Skull is now called the cranium. Kneecap is the patella. Collarbone is the clavicle. Shoulder blade is the scapula. And the wrist we now call the carpals. Right, now we're really onto the U phase of the lesson now. So again, it's just, as I said at the beginning, this is a very much knowledge-based, knowledge recall lesson. We just need to know these things. So you need to spend some time, maybe take about 4 minutes to learn all the bones of the body. Go back to the slides and then come back to this and see if you can write out the answers. Yeah, so maybe hit escape here go back up, learn again, come back into this slide, and have a look at it and see if you can write out all those bones. And fair play to you if you can remember all of them, because that will be mean you being extremely successful in this lesson now today. You may remember it now, but unless you're going back over it from time to time and trying to retest yourself on all of this, there's so much content, as you know, that we have to learn in PE. You have to keep revisiting this content. It's only going to get harder and harder as we move forward and learn more things. So have a go at this, see how you get on, and then obviously move on to the next slide. Right, this one here, if I was in a lesson, I'd probably get out my post-it notes and get you to pair up and stick, label, each other and stick the bones on, possibly even, a challenge if you can remember the different areas of the vertebrae and stick those on as well. An activity that you may want to do at home is just to, get a piece of paper and draw it out and then stick on your bedroom wall. Every time you're in there, you see it, it's like, yeah, I can remember that. Ask somebody to ask you questions. Teach somebody is a good way to always learn stuff, is to who else in your household, go and teach them and say, I'm going to teach you all the bones of your body. I'm going to teach you about the spine, the vertebrae, and see how you get on with that. A great way to learn and retain knowledge is to be able to explain and teach it to somebody else. So give that a go. And lastly, from me, now is the time. Once you're really confident with the knowledge that you've done today, I don't care whether you have to go back over and look at this PowerPoint a few times. If you're sick of listening to me, just turn the volume off, go back through it again, write out your notes, do what you can, but definitely go back into show my homework before 4 o'clock and get in there. Remember, with these quizzes, you got 3 chances to get 100%. So let's see what you can do. If you get 50% the first time round, just go back in again and see if you can learn from those mistakes. Go back in and hopefully get as close to 100% as you can. Miss Anderson's class, same thing. Get in there and let's see who can get the highest out of those 2 classes. Now remember, you've also got on Wednesday for my class, you got to go in and look at the Everlearner video to do with this topic. But just follow show my homework. That's the central point, to go in and find out what you need to do each day. I know all your teachers are doing it. All your teachers are going in and tracking, and all your teachers, including me, Miss Anderson, will be on Teams on the days that we normally teach it, so you can ask any questions, and we can clarify any points to do. Okay, but that's it for me. Thanks very much for listening. I hope this is recorded now, otherwise it's a waste of an hour of my time. So good learning today, guys and girls, and stay safe, keep active, keep learning, don't fall behind, stick with the pace. All right, over and out.